So here we are, still in the middle of a genocide that's taking place now. And I've mentioned this in some of the earlier videos, and I'm not the first to mention that this is the first genocide ever televised on television in human history. It's quite appalling. And at this point, there's barely a news station that hasn't shown the scenes of children screaming and crying and utter devastation put onto Gaza in a way that is actually quite unprecedented. Now, this is the strange thing about what we're dealing with right now. On one hand, this is only occurring because of the US government. Israel would not have the funds or the ability to handle international pressure or regional pressure without the support from who I now will call Genocide Joe, President Joe Biden. He is the greatest facilitator to the Israeli government's genocide on Gaza and is escalating the ethnic cleansing and the terror by the settlers with the IDF in the West Bank and the expulsions of Palestinians and what's going on in East Jerusalem. This is all being facilitated by the United States government, but they're allowing it to be shown on television. So in real time, and in terms of our mainstream media. Now, if you watch Al Jazeera, as I have been watching every day and night children being slaughtered, journalists that I've watched that end up being slaughtered by the Israeli military during this few-month session here since October 7th. And right now we're sliding into the new year. Over 21,000 dead, probably far more than that. Close to 9,000 children documented, probably far more than that. Bodies under rubble. The information we have is that Israel used what are called dumb bombs, meaning not precise bombs, meaning bombs that were meant to blow up entire parts of civilization, of the people. We've seen that Israel went and assaulted Al-Shifa hospital, a hospital where they claimed that there was this major operations underneath the hospital. They gave us graphics and all these things. Well, the evidence for what they found was very limited, but what we saw were rotting babies in incubators live on TV and just more dead people. Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel, admitted that Israel actually built the bunkers underneath the hospital when they were working there in the 80s. So that was caught on CNN. Israel claimed that there was an Arabic calendar with names of Hamas people, and it was just a calendar with the days of the week in Arabic. Israel got caught doing that. The Israelis have put out propaganda showing people being killed in a war zone and faking their own deaths. And that was actually a Lebanese film. And it was just a clip taken from people that were actors. That was also called out on mainstream media. And the Israeli, was it Mark Regev, had to admit, yes, well, okay, that's a mistake. Well, we're talking about a lying regime that's killing children in mass on our TV, and what's happening here is that we're seeing this actually happen. We're hearing the lies that are caught over and over again by Israel, and we have the US government who apologizes for, defends, and talks about an ironclad defense relationship that the US has with Israel. Now, you've been raised your whole life on the question of what you should do under a situation like this. Every one of you listening, especially if you grow up in the United States. We've read, you grow up in school and you're told about all these historical events that are terrible, where human beings treat each other awful, and you've always had this question posed: what would you do? What was the culpability of Germans that were enjoying their life in Germany under the Nazis when there were people in concentration camps and they were going to gas chambers? How was it those Germans could just go about their lives and then act like they didn't have any responsibility for that? Did they? If they did, then what is the average American who's seeing this unfold? Like, what is our responsibility? Obviously, the demonstrations are huge against this. Many Jewish Americans are making a stand against this. And our politicians don't listen. But what about the rest of you? And what about some of you who are supporting this? Well, I'm not having a conversation with you. You're hopeless at this point. You're a hopeless human being. You have no humanity in yourself. And we've been warned about people like you our whole lives as well. But what about the rest of you here who are confused about what to do? It's not a time to sit on the fence. You can't. And here's why. Because there are many other conflicts in the world that are going on. And some may be, I can't say if they're worse or how to compare. Sudan is a major one that we should take note of, for example. But this one is the one that's on our TV every night. So we're seeing it all. There's no excuse. We're not seeing other conflicts. And maybe that's wrong. We're not, our media is showing us what we need to know. And the United States is the sole main provider of this. European nations, other Western nations are also supporting Israel. Germany is proving once again to be on the wrong side of history. Germans, obviously, as we just talked about, were complicit with the Nazi Holocaust, and now they're making up for it by helping support a Holocaust against people in Gaza to make up for it. I don't really... Arnold Schwarzenegger is an Austrian American. He talked about how his family were participated in Nazism, and now his way to compensate for that is also to support a genocide in Gaza. So, okay, we have some real problems with the moral compass of a lot of places. But again, this is something that the United States is directly funding. This is what a good chunk of our elected politicians are supporting and barely giving any resistance to. So for any U.S. politician, no matter what political party that's making a stand against this, they're the only redeemable ones. The rest are a part of Genocide Joe's culpability. Now look, it's not just an accidental consequence of things. Okay, we understand that October 7th happened and that Hamas has participated in certain activities that were deemed terroristic or attacks on civilian populations. And if you studied the conflict, you knew that conflict didn't start there, that there was the siege on Gaza. We can go back many different times. But right now, what's happening is it's too huge to simply have any excuse or context for anything else in the past. And there is the philosophy of genocide that is coming out of Israel. Netanyahu and several other of the far-right leaders in Israel have referred to the Palestinians as Amalek. So, I'm just going to do a brief little discussion of this in context to all of this. Amalek in the Bible is a motif. It's a motif of an enemy that's so bad that God wants everybody, even the children, killed from Amalek. Okay. Now I need to explain something before I go into this just discussion of this. For pacifist Christians and for Jewish participants, such as Neturei Karta, other religious Jews who do not believe in wars against Palestinians or other people, who take on a much more peaceful view of their religions, they also are bothered by some of these passages in the Bible, which I'm going to cover, that talk about killing of children. How they process this is they simply say that this was a past conflict that's not applicable to all times, and that God was in control and that we have to leave it there. In other words, I grew up in a pacifist Christian tradition that almost everybody who read these passages were bothered by, but we were basically told this is not something that we emulate now. It's something you just have to kind of resolve and hope that you'll get an answer from God at a later date, okay? And it also is a reason why a lot of people just stop believing in the Bible, because they're repulsed by these verses. So there's different ways that, but what the important part I wanted to say is that this does not reflect the view of everybody who's Jewish or Christian that has this in their Bible. But having said that, Deuteronomy, or Devarim in Hebrew, in the Torah, in the Bible, at 25:17 through 19, there's a discussion of an Amalek that has to be eradicated for attacking God's people. And then it's brought up again in 1 Samuel 15:2 through 3. But before I read this, I just want to kind of also explain something. It's interesting, in the first century, there was a Jewish historian named Josephus, and he collaborated with the Romans, and he basically tried to explain Judaism to the Romans. Now the Jews rebelled against the Romans, and the Romans crushed the Jews in kind of something similar we're seeing here. But Josephus collaborated on the Roman side. Now, he's a whole long story, but he retells the Bible stories back to the Romans. And why I'm bringing this up is he tells a story of Amalek, but he makes it even seem worse. He exaggerates the behavior of Israel against the Amalekites because Romans celebrated genocide. In other words, we used to live in a world where superpowers would want to show their strength, show off that if you mess with us, we will kill your children. We will drag your women by their hair out, like something. And they'd had monuments built to this kind of behavior terribly. So Josephus is going to basically show off this behavior to the Romans and kind of show that, hey, well, we have, we got to do things as well. And so, but first I'm going to read 1 Samuel 15:2 through 3. And here's what it says. And this is in the Bible. This is in the Tanakh for the Jews, the Old Testament for Christians. Then the Bible says, this is what the Lord Almighty says, I will punish the Amalekites for what they did to Israel, and they waylaid them as they came up from Egypt. Now go attack the Amalekites and totally destroy everything that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. Unquote. That is a very thorough text of genocide, of extermination. Now, Josephus elaborated on this in his book of Antiquities. And so what did he say in response to this? He said, so Saul promised to do what he was commanded. Some of them, the army starved out with famine, or used famine, sound familiar? And some of them gained by other methods. And after all, he betook himself to slay the women and the children, and thought he did not act therein either barbarously or inhumanely. First, because they were enemies whom he thus treated, and in the next place, because it was done by the command of God, whom it was dangerous not to obey. For God hated the nation of the Amalekites to such a degree that he commanded Saul to have no pity on even those infants which we by nature chiefly are compassionate to. So, this was a very comfortable way of describing this. Here's my point of why I bring up the Josephus text, is that we have lived in a world in which political leaders and philosophers could justify, or thought that they could justify or celebrate, the ideas of genocides. And we don't live in a world like that now. We've grown up, at least in the West, being told that that's the most awful thing that you can do. And I think that that's right to have that view. But what we're seeing within the political right that's in power in Israel is this kind of view taking place now. And look, Israel has had some extreme fringes on this for a while that just didn't have the mainstream momentum. In 1980, a man named Rabbi Israel Hess, he published an article called "Genocide: A Commandment of the Torah." This is something that he was referring to the justification of doing this against the Palestinians. If you just Google and you look up Jewish settlers in the West Bank using the term Amalek as they terrorize Palestinians, you can find, at least in the past, you could find this kind of activity taking place. So we're having a political ideology in action. As I've mentioned in some of the earlier videos, Likud and Jewish Strength and the other parties that are in Israel right now consider Gaza to be Israel. So this is not about eradicating or stopping Hamas only. And in fact, it's not about that at all. It's about eradicating Palestinians. It's about pushing them into the Sinai, which is the goal that Israel keeps wanting to make happen. It is not clear what is going to happen after this, or just to what extent the damage has been done. It's not clear what kind of activity would even fix already what has been done. But here's what's clear. This can open up with more fronts with Hezbollah and Lebanon. We're already seeing with activities in Yemen at the Red Sea port. There are militias attacking U.S. bases in Iraq for what's going on. Fronts are being opened up in all places. This could all spill over on behalf of Israel's genocide. And again, with the support of the U.S. government. Look, we went through this already before. As I've mentioned, growing up, what side would you be on? It's impossible for anybody in any position of power, anybody in education, anybody doing anything within the public sphere to ignore what is happening and not be culpable. What we're seeing is serious. If you can't make a position and stand against this now, after seeing it on TV and seeing it directly coming from our governments, then you will be moved by nothing. There's nothing, I think, that can be worse to take place that would move you. So, who are you? Ask yourself, what are you doing right now? We are all limited in what we can do, but at the very least, calling Congress, letting them know just how we feel, demonstrations, boycotting, something. Because at the end of the day, when all the dead children are counted, where will you have been during it all? And that's as simple as that.